Welcome to the book Execution, The Discipline of Getting Things Done, written by Larry Bossidy, a former CEO of Honeywell, and Ram Charan, a trusted business advisor. This book is not about theories or buzzwords. It's about one essential truth: no matter how great your ideas are, they're worthless unless you can turn them into results. Think about that. How many times have you seen companies with grand visions fall apart because nothing actually got done? How many meetings have you sat in where people talked a lot but didn't follow through? That's what this book is here to fix. It's not about dreaming. It's about doing. And it's written by people who've lived it, who know what it's like to run big organizations and still stay connected to the real work. In today's fast-paced, unpredictable world, businesses don't fail because they lack ideas. They fail because they don't know how to bring those ideas to life. That's where execution comes in. Execution means closing the gap between what you want to happen and what actually happens. It's the bridge between plans and results. The authors want you to know that execution isn't just another job on the list, it's the main job. Whether you're leading a company, managing a team, or trying to hit a personal goal, you can't afford to leave execution to chance. You can't assume it will happen just because you gave a good speech or wrote a nice plan. You need to be involved. You need to make sure things move forward. That's what this book teaches you how to do. The ideas here come from real-world experience, not theory. Larry Bossidy didn't just sit in boardrooms. He walked factory floors, asked tough questions, and made sure his teams followed through. Ram Charan has worked with businesses around the globe, helping leaders learn how to be more hands-on, more grounded, and more effective. This book is built around three key parts of execution: people, strategy, and operations. That means having the right people in the right jobs, creating a strategy that's not just ambitious but realistic, and making sure your everyday work matches your bigger goals. When these three things work together, execution becomes part of your company's DNA. You'll also learn that execution is a discipline. It's not about working harder, it's about working smarter. It's about building habits and systems that keep you on track. It's about asking the right questions, paying attention to details, and not letting problems slide. And above all, it's about leaders taking responsibility. Not blaming others. Not stepping away. But staying present, involved, and focused. So if you've ever felt frustrated watching good ideas go nowhere, or watched your team struggle to follow through, this book is for you. It's for people who want to make things happen, not just talk about them. It's practical. It's honest. And it will show you step by step how to turn plans into results. Now let's dive into Chapter 1, where we explore why execution must be the leader's top priority. Chapter 1: Execution is the leader's job. Let's start with a simple but powerful idea. If you're a leader, your number one job is to make sure things actually get done. It's not enough to come up with strategies or give inspiring talks. Those things matter, but they don't count for much if nobody follows through on them. What truly separates successful leaders from the rest is their ability to turn plans into action. In many companies, execution is treated like something that happens after the real work is done. Leaders come up with big ideas, and then they hand them off to others to handle the details. But that's a dangerous mindset. Because without strong execution, even the best ideas go nowhere. You can have the most brilliant plan in the world, but if nobody carries it out properly, it's useless. Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan explain that this isn't just a small issue. It's a major reason why organizations fail. The leaders at the top don't stay close enough to the action. They get caught up in high-level thinking and lose touch with what's really happening on the ground. But real leadership means staying involved, asking questions, and making sure everyone is clear on what needs to be done, and actually doing it. Now, let's be clear, this doesn't mean micromanaging. Good leaders don't hover over every task. But they do stay connected. They know their people. They ask the right questions. They keep track of progress. They deal with problems directly, instead of waiting for things to fall apart. And they follow up, not just once, but regularly. That's what strong execution looks like. The authors describe three main responsibilities that every leader must focus on. First, choosing and developing the right people. This means making sure that the team has the right skills and that everyone is in a role where they can succeed. Second, shaping a realistic strategy. Not just something that sounds good, but something that can actually be done with the people and resources available. And third, making sure the operations of the company, its daily activities and processes, are supporting that strategy. These three areas, people, strategy, and operations, are deeply connected. You can't treat them separately. A good strategy won't matter if the people can't carry it out. And even the best people can't succeed if the company's day-to-day operations are broken or misaligned. Everything has to work together. That's why execution has to be part of everything a leader does, not an afterthought, but the core of leadership itself. The chapter also emphasizes that execution starts with honesty. Leaders need to create a culture where people feel safe being real, talking about what's working, what's not, and what's getting in the way. This means having tough conversations, admitting when things aren't going as planned, and facing reality instead of pretending everything is fine. When teams avoid hard truths, they lose their ability to improve. But when leaders model open, honest dialogue, everyone gets better. One of the stories shared is about how Bossidy, during his time as a CEO, would often walk around and talk to employees at all levels, not just senior managers. He asked questions, listened closely, and got a true sense of what was going on in the company. He didn't rely only on reports or meetings. He knew that to execute well, he had to stay connected to the people doing the real work. That's a big part of what execution is about, not sitting above the action, but being part of it. Good leaders are not distant. They're engaged. They make execution a part of their daily routine, not something that's delegated and forgotten. So the message of this first chapter is very clear. If you want to lead well, you must own execution. You can't pass it off or pretend it's someone else's responsibility. It's your job. It's where real leadership lives. And it's the difference between making things happen and watching them fall apart. Chapter 2: The Execution Gap. Welcome back. In this chapter, we dig into a problem that shows up in organizations everywhere, from small businesses to giant corporations. It's the frustrating gap between planning and doing. You've probably seen it before, maybe even experienced it yourself. A company makes a big announcement about a new strategy or vision. Everyone nods and claps. There are meetings, presentations, maybe even a few posters. But then, slowly, it fades away. Weeks pass, and nothing really changes. People keep doing what they've always done. The goals don't get met. And no one talks about it anymore. That's what the authors call the execution gap. It's not that the idea was bad. In fact, the strategy might have been smart, creative, and necessary. But what was missing was follow-through. Execution didn't happen. And it's not just about missing a deadline or two. The execution gap causes bigger problems. Teams get confused. Priorities become unclear. Energy drops. People stop believing that leadership means what it says. Over time, it creates a culture where talk is cheap and nothing truly gets done. One of the main causes of this gap is a common mistake leaders make. They assume that execution is automatic. That once they've made a decision or announced a new plan, their teams will just run with it. But that's not how things work in the real world. Execution needs structure. It needs attention, guidance, and regular check-ins. If you don't manage it, it doesn't happen. Simple as that. The chapter also explains how many leaders get stuck in wishful thinking. They build plans based on how they hope things will turn out, not on how things actually work. They ignore warning signs. They assume people will figure it out. And when reality doesn't match their hopes, they're surprised. But the truth is, if they'd stayed close to the ground, talked with their teams, asked questions, and looked at the facts, they might have seen the problems coming much earlier. Another issue is that leaders don't always spend enough time with their people. They stay in their offices, go to executive meetings, and read reports, but they're not having real conversations with the folks doing the work. And when that happens, small problems start to grow. People get off track. Misunderstandings build up. And no one wants to speak up because they don't feel seen or supported. The authors explain that execution isn't something you check in on once in a while. It has to be built into the everyday culture of your organization. It's a way of working where everyone understands the goals, knows how their work connects to those goals, and feels responsible for making progress. That kind of culture doesn't happen by accident. It happens when leaders make execution a priority, every single day. Another key point in this chapter is about accountability. Execution breaks down when people don't know who's supposed to do what, or when they're not held responsible for results. When no one is tracking progress or following up, it's easy to let things slide. But when leaders check in regularly, ask direct questions, and expect real answers, people take ownership. They work harder, stay focused, and get things done. Follow-through is a big part of this. It's not enough to set goals. You have to keep coming back to them. You have to review progress, adjust as needed, and keep people moving forward. That's how momentum is built. That's how trust grows. People need to see that their leaders care about execution, not just in words, but in action. This kind of leadership might not always be flashy, but it's what makes the biggest difference in whether a company succeeds or stalls. It's about staying grounded, paying attention, and being there, not just when things are going well, but especially when they're not. Leaders who close the execution gap are the ones who take action, stay connected to their people, and never let good ideas die from neglect. So, if you want to lead a team or a company where things actually get done, where ideas become outcomes and plans become progress, this chapter makes it clear: you can't afford to leave execution to chance. You have to drive it, support it, and live it, every single day. Chapter 3: The Building Blocks of Execution. In this chapter, the authors explain the core elements that make execution possible. They call these the building blocks, the essential ingredients that every organization needs to get things done effectively. Without them, even the most talented teams and the best strategies will eventually fall apart. But with them in place, execution becomes part of the way the company works every single day. The first building block is having leaders who are deeply engaged. This doesn't mean micromanaging or hovering over employees. It means being involved enough to know what's happening in your organization. Leaders who execute well make time for their people. They ask questions. They listen. They check progress. They don't just sit in meetings. They roll up their sleeves and get into the details when needed. That sends a message to everyone else: execution matters, and we're all responsible for it. The second building block is having the right people in the right roles. This may sound obvious, but it's often overlooked. Sometimes people are promoted because of seniority or loyalty, not because they're the best fit for the job. Other times, leaders avoid making tough decisions about underperformers. But if the wrong people are in key positions, execution will suffer, no matter how good the strategy is. Execution requires talent. It requires people who can handle responsibility, think clearly, and deliver results. That's why Bossidy and Charan stress the importance of a strong people process. They don't just mean HR checklists. They're talking about real conversations where leaders evaluate performance, develop talent, and make sure the organization is ready for the future. This kind of process isn't just once a year, it's continuous. It's honest. And it's focused on results, not just personality or politics. The third building block is a strategy that's tied directly to execution. Many companies come up with big, exciting plans that sound great but don't match what the organization can actually do. A strategy must be realistic. It has to consider the current resources, talent, and systems in place. Otherwise, you end up with a plan that looks good on paper but doesn't work in practice. Execution-focused leaders constantly ask themselves, can we really do this? Do we have the people to make it happen? Are our day-to-day operations ready to support this strategy? If the answers are unclear or negative, they adjust. They make changes. They don't move forward with a plan just because it's bold. They make sure it's doable. That leads us to the fourth building block, a strong and simple operating process. This is the system that keeps everything moving. It connects strategy to people's everyday work. It ensures that goals are clear, timelines are set, and progress is tracked. Without a strong operating rhythm, execution turns into chaos. People start guessing. Priorities shift without warning. Projects stall. But with a good process in place, everyone knows what they're working toward and how to get there. A good operating process includes regular reviews. These aren't just updates for the sake of updates. They're real conversations about what's working, what isn't, and what needs to change. Leaders must lead these meetings with clarity and honesty. They should focus on facts, not wishful thinking. And they should come ready to make decisions and solve problems, not just listen. Throughout the chapter, the authors return to a common theme: execution is a discipline. That means it's not about luck or personality. It's about habits, systems, and leadership behaviors that are practiced consistently. It's not always exciting. It doesn't always get applause. But it's what makes the difference between a company that talks about goals and one that actually reaches them. This chapter reminds us that execution doesn't happen by accident. It happens when leaders care enough to be present. When they take responsibility for people, strategy, and processes. And when they commit to building a culture where follow-through is expected, supported, and celebrated. Chapter 4: The Leader's 7 Essential Behaviors. In this chapter, we're given a practical list, a kind of leadership guidebook, for what behaviors leaders must consistently show if they want their organizations to succeed at execution. Bossidy and Charan narrow it down to 7 key behaviors. These aren't fancy theories or leadership fads. They're straightforward habits that any leader can practice, and they make all the difference between talk and results. The first behavior is knowing your people and your business. This means more than remembering names or reading reports. It's about spending time where the real work happens. Talking to employees. Asking thoughtful questions. Understanding how your company actually runs. Leaders who know their people can sense when something's off, when a team is struggling, or when a great idea is stuck. That level of connection is critical for execution. The second behavior is insisting on realism. A lot of organizations get stuck in wishful thinking. Leaders want to believe that things are better than they really are. But that attitude only leads to failure. Execution depends on facing facts, no matter how uncomfortable they might be. Realistic leaders encourage open dialogue. They want to know what's not working, and they create a culture where people can speak the truth without fear. Third is setting clear goals and priorities. Sounds basic, but many companies skip this step. They try to do everything at once, and nothing gets done well. Good leaders focus their teams by making priorities crystal clear. They help people understand what matters most right now, and what can wait. They don't overload the team with too many goals. Instead, they create a sharp focus that drives action. Next is following through. This is where execution usually breaks down. A plan gets launched, then forgotten. A goal is set, but never reviewed. But strong leaders don't let that happen. They follow up regularly. They check on progress. They remind people of commitments. And they make sure everyone stays aligned from start to finish. Following through shows that the leader means what they say, and that everyone is expected to deliver. The fifth behavior is rewarding those who do well. People want to feel valued when they work hard and produce results. But in many companies, rewards are based on politics, tenure, or appearances, not actual performance. Great leaders change that. They recognize the people who execute. They celebrate results. And they use rewards to reinforce the behavior they want to see more of. That motivates the whole organization to take execution seriously. The sixth behavior is expanding people's capabilities. Execution isn't just about pushing people to work harder. It's about helping them grow. That means coaching, mentoring, and developing your team's skills. Leaders who execute well are also great teachers. They help their people get better so the whole organization becomes stronger over time. And finally, the seventh behavior is knowing yourself. This might seem personal, but it's deeply connected to execution. Leaders who understand their own strengths, weaknesses, and triggers are more effective. They don't let ego get in the way. They stay calm under pressure. They build trust by being consistent. And they're able to adapt when things change. Knowing yourself helps you lead others with authenticity and clarity. This chapter isn't about being perfect. It's about being intentional. These 7 behaviors aren't traits you're born with. They're choices you make every day. And if you practice them consistently, you create a culture where execution becomes a natural part of how things get done. The authors remind us again, execution isn't a mystery. It's a discipline built on real actions, real behaviors, and real leadership. And these 7 behaviors are the foundation. Chapter 5: Creating the Framework for Cultural Change. This chapter tackles something that often feels big and overwhelming: changing a company's culture. But the authors break it down and show us how culture isn't just about slogans or team-building exercises. It's about the behaviors that are repeated every day and what leaders actually do, not just what they say. If an organization wants to become great at execution, it has to build a culture where execution is expected, supported, and rewarded. The first step in changing any culture is understanding what it currently is. Every organization already has a culture, even if it was never intentionally designed. It's shaped by habits, traditions, unwritten rules, and how people act when no one's watching. Some cultures are careful and cautious. Others are fast-moving but chaotic. Some avoid conflict. Others encourage it in a healthy way. The point is, if you don't know what your culture really looks like, you can't change it. Bossidy and Charan explain that leaders must define the behaviors they want to see more of. Not just values, but specific actions. Do you want people to speak openly in meetings? Do you want them to take ownership of problems instead of passing blame? Do you want decisions to be made quickly and followed through on? You need to make those expectations clear and model them yourself. When leaders behave in a certain way, others follow. It sets the tone. Another critical part of shaping culture is aligning it with your performance and reward systems. If you say execution matters but never hold anyone accountable for results, the message won't stick. If you tell people to be honest but punish them when they speak up, they'll stop trusting you. Changing culture isn't just about posters or town halls. It's about changing what gets rewarded, what gets punished, and what gets noticed. The authors emphasize that culture change doesn't happen overnight. It takes consistent effort, repeated conversations, and patience. You don't flip a switch. You shape it little by little, decision by decision. Leaders must be persistent. They have to keep reinforcing the message, praising the right behavior, and correcting missteps without delay. A key strategy for making change stick is linking culture to execution directly. For example, if you want a culture of accountability, you need systems in place where people track progress and follow through. If you want a culture of collaboration, you need clear ways for departments to work together and share credit. Culture is not separate from execution, it's how execution comes to life. The chapter also warns against waiting too long to make changes. Some leaders are afraid to disrupt the status quo or hurt feelings. But if a part of your culture is standing in the way of results, it needs to be addressed. That might mean changing leadership in certain areas. It might mean reshaping teams. And yes, it might be uncomfortable. But it's necessary if you want lasting improvement. Finally, the authors remind us that culture is always changing anyway, whether you manage it or not. The question is whether you're shaping it on purpose, or letting it drift in the wrong direction. Great leaders take control of that process. They understand that culture is not a fluffy concept, it's the operating system of the organization. And if you want your organization to execute consistently and effectively, you have to make sure that operating system supports it. So, this chapter gives us a clear message. If you want better execution, start with the culture. Look at the behavior patterns. Set the example. Align systems. And keep reinforcing the change until it becomes second nature to everyone in the company. Chapter 6: The job no leader should delegate. Having the right people in the right place. This chapter dives into one of the most vital responsibilities of any leader, making sure the right people are in the right roles. The authors are crystal clear. This is not a task you can hand off to someone else. No matter how busy you are, or how large your organization is, selecting and developing talent is something you must own. Why? Because nothing has more impact on execution than people. If you don't have the right team, you won't get the right results. It's that simple. Too many leaders treat hiring and promotion like side issues. They delegate it to HR or trust their instincts without doing the work to really understand their people. But great execution depends on great judgment about people. You need to know who can handle pressure, who can take initiative, who will follow through, and who needs support or change. If you get this wrong, everything else becomes harder. The chapter explains that having the right people isn't just about raw talent or experience. It's about fit. Does this person's strengths match the demands of the role? Do they have the skills not just to plan, but to execute? Do they take ownership of outcomes, or do they point fingers when things go wrong? Leaders who excel at execution are constantly asking these questions and adjusting their teams accordingly. This isn't about being harsh or treating people like parts to swap out. It's about being honest and clear-eyed. People deserve to be in roles where they can succeed. And organizations can't afford to tolerate poor fit for long, because it drags down performance across the board. The authors urge leaders to have the tough conversations. If someone's not working out, address it. Help them grow, or help them move into a different role. But don't ignore it. Another important point is that leaders must know their people deeply, not just their resumes, but their character, motivation, and capacity. This requires spending time with them. Not just once a year during reviews, but regularly. Talk to them. Watch how they lead others. Understand how they think. When you do this, you're better equipped to coach them, challenge them, and support them in doing their best work. The authors also talk about the importance of building strong leadership at every level, not just at the top. A company that executes well has capable managers and team leads who understand execution and hold their teams accountable. Leaders must constantly be looking for the next generation of talent, people who can grow into bigger roles and carry the culture of execution forward. One of the practical tools shared in this chapter is the idea of rigorous people reviews. This means evaluating not just performance outcomes, but how people get those results. Are they building strong teams? Are they developing others? Are they aligned with the strategy? These reviews aren't about politics or personal preferences. They're about performance, contribution, and potential. The message here is strong. Don't take a passive approach to talent. If you want to drive execution, you need to be actively shaping your team. That might mean promoting someone unexpectedly, mentoring a rising star, or even letting go of a long-time employee who's no longer a good fit. These decisions are tough. But they're what make you a leader. This chapter reminds us that people decisions are the foundation of everything else. Strategy, goals, and plans are important, but they're just words unless the people carrying them out are capable and committed. If you want to get things done, start with the team. Put the right people in the right seats. Give them the tools they need. And hold them to a high standard. That's not a task to delegate. It's the job that defines great leadership. Chapter 7, Follow Through. This chapter focuses on something that sounds simple, but often gets overlooked: the importance of following through. You'd be surprised how many organizations fail, not because they lack vision or strategy, but because they don't stick with their plans long enough to see results. They start something new, make a big announcement, maybe hold a few meetings, and then nothing. People move on, lose interest, or shift focus to the next big idea. That's why follow-through is a make-or-break part of execution. The authors make it clear: setting a goal is only the beginning. The real work starts after the kickoff. That's when leaders have to keep the team focused, make sure the right steps are being taken, and ensure problems are being addressed as they come up. Without this kind of attention, even the most exciting initiatives will fizzle out. Leaders who follow through well are constantly checking on progress, not in a controlling way, but in a clear and supportive one. They don't wait until the end of a project to ask how things went. They're involved along the way, asking, "Where are we now? What's getting in the way? What do you need from me?" That kind of leadership shows the team that the goal matters, and that someone is watching, caring, and holding people accountable. This chapter also explains how lack of follow-through creates a dangerous message. When people see that leaders don't check in or push for results, they start to believe that execution isn't really expected. That's how mediocrity creeps in. Priorities shift without explanation. Projects lose urgency. And people start playing it safe instead of driving toward outcomes. One practical tip the authors share is having regular review sessions. These aren't about punishing people for falling behind. They're about solving problems, removing obstacles, and adjusting course if needed. These sessions keep everyone aligned. They remind the team of the bigger picture, reinforce accountability, and help prevent surprises at the end. The chapter also talks about the importance of visibility. People need to see progress, and leaders need to share it. When milestones are reached, celebrate them. When someone solves a tough problem, recognize them. When things stall, be honest about it. Execution lives in the details, and details can't be hidden if you want things to improve. Another point made here is that follow-through requires discipline. It's easy to start things and get excited about the next new idea. But the best leaders resist that temptation. They stay with the current mission until it's complete. They bring closure. They make sure lessons are learned. They don't leave a trail of half-finished projects behind them. That consistency builds trust, and it builds results. This chapter also addresses the emotional side of follow-through. Sometimes leaders avoid it because they don't want to be the bad guy. They're afraid of pushing too hard or being seen as difficult. But real leaders understand that accountability isn't about being mean, it's about caring enough to help people succeed. If something's off track, address it. If someone needs help, give it. If goals need adjusting, adjust them, but never abandon them without a real reason. So, the message of this chapter is simple but powerful. Execution depends on persistence. If you start something, stay with it. Keep the focus. Keep the energy. Keep the conversations going. When you follow through, you create a culture where results are expected, supported, and celebrated. Chapter 8: The People Process. Making the link with strategy and operations. This chapter is about connecting the dots, how to link the people in your organization directly with the strategy and the day-to-day work that makes everything happen. The authors emphasize that this is one of the most important responsibilities leaders have. Without this connection, strategy stays abstract, operations become disconnected, and people end up working hard but not necessarily on the right things. The people process is more than just hiring and performance reviews. It's about deeply understanding who your people are, what they're capable of, what they're learning, and where they need to grow. It's about aligning talent with the company's goals so that every person is in a position to make the biggest possible impact. And most importantly, it's about building a strong leadership pipeline, making sure your future leaders are being identified and developed today. Too many organizations treat the people process as a formality. They fill out forms, have surface-level conversations, and move on. But Bossidy and Charan argue that this process should be a dynamic, ongoing conversation led by top leaders. The goal is to create a real understanding of how the company's talent supports its strategy, and what changes need to be made to close any gaps. The chapter walks through how this people process should work in practice. It starts with a regular review of your leadership team. Not just how they've performed in the past, but how they're positioned for the future. Are they growing? Are they adapting? Are they leading others effectively? This is not about being nice. It's about being clear, fair, and focused on results. Next, the process should evaluate talent at every level of the organization. Who's delivering? Who's showing potential? Who's ready for more responsibility? And just as importantly, who isn't keeping up? These conversations can be uncomfortable, but they're essential. Avoiding them only delays problems and hurts the business. Once you've identified the talent, you have to match it with the business's needs. That means putting your best people where they can have the most impact, not just rewarding loyalty or seniority, but thinking strategically about where the company is headed. If a certain part of the business is growing or going through major change, that's where you need your strongest leaders. This alignment between people and strategy is the heart of execution. But it doesn't stop there. Leaders must also look at operations and ask, do our systems, tools, and processes support our people and our strategy? If the systems are outdated, confusing, or poorly structured, they'll slow everything down. Great execution requires operational support that helps people move quickly, collaborate effectively, and focus on what matters most. This chapter also emphasizes the importance of developing leaders at every level. You can't rely on a few top performers to carry the entire organization. You need to build depth, train future managers, coach rising stars, and provide opportunities for people to grow into bigger roles. That's how you create long-term strength and resilience. Finally, the authors point out that none of this happens by chance. It takes intention. It takes commitment from the top. And it takes leaders who are willing to put in the time to understand their people, not just their job titles, but their real strengths, struggles, and aspirations. The people process, when done well, creates alignment. It ensures that the strategy isn't just a document, it's a living part of how people are hired, developed, and managed. It ensures that operations aren't just routines, they're enablers of success. And most importantly, it ensures that execution isn't left to chance, it's built into every part of the organization. Chapter 9: The Strategy Process, Making the Link with People and Operations. This chapter takes a closer look at how to create strategies that actually work, not just ideas that sound impressive in a presentation, but plans that your people can carry out with real results. The authors make it clear that strategy is not a one-time event. It's not about holding an off-site meeting, dreaming up a bold direction, and then stepping back to let someone else figure out the details. A great strategy must be deeply connected to both your people and your day-to-day operations. The chapter begins by challenging a common mistake. Leaders often create strategies in isolation. They think only at the top level, without considering how the strategy will be executed on the ground. This kind of approach creates plans that are disconnected from reality. To avoid this, the authors insist that strategy must be built with execution in mind from the very beginning. One of the main points they make is that strategy isn't just about where you want to go, it's about how you're going to get there. That means thinking carefully about whether your people are ready, whether your systems can support the changes, and whether you have the resources and capabilities to follow through. A strategy that ignores these questions is just wishful thinking. That's why leaders must involve their teams in the strategy process. Get input from the people who will actually be responsible for making the changes happen. Ask questions. Listen to concerns. Learn what's working now and what isn't. This kind of involvement builds better strategies, but it also builds commitment. People support what they help create. The authors explain that one of the most powerful tools for making strategy real is asking the right questions. Questions like, what will it take to achieve this goal? What obstacles might we face? Who will be responsible for each step? Do we have the talent in place? Or do we need to move people around or develop new skills? These questions force leaders to be realistic, not just optimistic. Another key message in this chapter is that strategy is a continuous process. It's not something you do once a year and forget about. You need to revisit it regularly, especially when the world is changing fast. New opportunities come up. Competitors move. Customer needs shift. Leaders need to be flexible and ready to adjust strategy as needed, while staying true to the company's core goals. The chapter also shows how a good strategy process always considers operations. You have to think about the systems, structures, and workflows that will carry the plan forward. If your operations aren't aligned with the strategy, execution will break down. For example, if your strategy calls for faster customer service, but your internal systems are slow and outdated, the plan won't work until those issues are addressed. The same goes for people. A strategy that depends on innovation won't succeed unless you have creative, empowered teams in place. A strategy that calls for cost-cutting won't work if the leaders don't know how to manage budgets effectively. That's why everything must be connected. Strategy, people, and operations must move together as one system. In short, this chapter teaches us that strategy is only as good as your ability to deliver on it. The best strategies are not just bold, they're grounded in reality. They reflect a deep understanding of what your people can do, how your systems operate, and where your organization really stands today. And they're built through conversations, not just slides. The authors end the chapter by reminding us that great leaders don't separate thinking from doing. They build strategy with their hands as well as their minds. They stay close to the details. They talk to their people. They make sure that everyone knows the plan, believes in it, and knows exactly what to do next. That's the kind of strategy that leads to real execution. Chapter 10: The Operations Process, Making the Link with Strategy and People. This chapter focuses on the third critical link in the execution triangle: operations. If strategy is the plan, and people are the players, then operations are the playbook, the way the game is actually run. Without strong operations, even the best strategy and the most talented team can fail. This chapter shows how to make sure the way your company runs day to day matches what you're trying to achieve long term. Operations often get overlooked because they don't seem exciting. Leaders may focus on vision or innovation, but the reality is, if your operations are sloppy or disorganized, everything else falls apart. The authors explain that operations are where strategy meets reality. It's where promises are tested. It's the engine of execution, and if it's not running well, your whole business suffers. The operations process starts with setting specific, practical goals that tie directly to your strategy. These goals need to be clear, measurable, and realistic. Not just broad targets like grow the business or improve customer satisfaction, but detailed milestones, things like increasing production by a certain percentage, reducing turnaround time by a specific number of days, or expanding into a new market within a set time frame. These are the kinds of goals that drive real action. Once the goals are set, the next step is creating plans to reach them and assigning accountability. This means breaking down big targets into smaller steps and making sure someone owns each step. Everyone should know what they're responsible for, when it's due, and how success will be measured. This kind of clarity makes execution smoother and faster. No guessing. No confusion. Regular reviews are a key part of the operations process. These aren't just status updates, they're deep discussions about progress, challenges, and next moves. Good reviews help teams stay focused. They identify problems early. They give leaders a chance to coach and support. And most importantly, they keep the pressure on in a healthy way. People know their work matters, and they know someone is paying attention. The chapter also highlights that operations should be flexible. A rigid system breaks under pressure, especially in today's fast-changing world. That's why the best operations processes include room to adjust. If something's not working, change it. If a new opportunity appears, adapt quickly. Flexibility doesn't mean chaos. It means smart responsiveness guided by clear goals and solid leadership. Linking operations to people is just as important. The systems you set up should support your team, not frustrate them. If your people are constantly running into roadblocks, outdated tools, poor communication, unclear procedures, it slows down everything. Great leaders listen to feedback from the front lines. They fix what's broken. They invest in better systems. They make sure operations help people do their jobs, not make them harder. This chapter also touches on technology. It's not about having the flashiest software or tools. It's about having systems that match your strategy and support your execution. Leaders should avoid tech just for the sake of it. Instead, ask, does this tool help us move faster, communicate better, or make smarter decisions? If it doesn't, it's just noise. Finally, the authors emphasize that operations must be constantly evolving. Just like strategy and people, your operational processes need regular attention. What worked last year might not work now. Leaders need to be hands-on, asking, is this still working? Are we hitting our targets? What needs to improve? That kind of ongoing review is what keeps execution strong and sharp. In the end, the operations process is about discipline. It's about making sure that the work gets done the right way, at the right time, by the right people. It's the system that turns ideas into action. And when it's linked closely with strategy and talent, it becomes the heart of an execution-driven organization. Chapter 11: Leading for Execution. In this final chapter, The authors bring everything together by focusing on what it truly means to lead with execution at the center. This isn't about titles, charisma, or giving big speeches. It's about being the kind of leader who gets results, not just once, but over and over again. Leading for execution means turning strategy, people, and operations into a tightly connected system that produces consistent, real-world outcomes. The chapter begins with a challenge to traditional leadership ideas. Many leaders are taught to focus on vision and inspiration, paint a picture of the future, and let others worry about the how. But Bossidy and Charan argue that's only half the job. Vision is important, but execution is where leadership is truly tested. If you can't turn your ideas into results, you're not leading, you're just talking. Execution-driven leadership is practical. It means knowing your business inside and out. It means asking good questions, listening to the answers, and acting on what you learn. It means staying involved, not just when things go wrong, but every day. This kind of leadership is grounded in reality. It doesn't rely on hope or wishful thinking. It faces the truth, even when the truth is uncomfortable. The authors explain that leaders who excel at execution don't do it alone. They build strong teams. They empower their people. They create a culture where performance matters and follow-through is expected. But they also stay personally committed. They don't delegate the hard parts. They show up. They follow up. And they make sure their teams have the support and clarity they need to win. Leading for execution also means being decisive. It's easy to delay decisions, especially when they're tough. But great leaders know that indecision is a form of failure. They gather the facts, weigh the options, and make the call. Then they commit. They don't get stuck in endless meetings or second-guessing. They move forward with confidence and clarity, and they bring their teams with them. This chapter reminds us that execution doesn't just happen because of systems or checklists. It happens because of leadership. Leadership that's willing to do the hard work. Leadership that's humble enough to listen, bold enough to act, and consistent enough to follow through. It's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the most reliable, the person others trust to make things happen. The final message of the book is simple but powerful. If you want to build an organization that delivers results, execution must be your top priority. That means building the right culture, putting the right people in place, aligning your operations with your strategy, and staying engaged as a leader every step of the way. Real leadership is about execution. That's how you earn trust. That's how you create value. And that's how you build something that lasts.